I ran the tally for the third time. $127, the sum total of my existence. A sad collection of wrinkled bills, stray quarters, and dimes scavenged from backpack seams, fished out of laundromat sofas, and scraped from the tip jar at the barista gig I lost last week. $127, the only shield keeping me off the pavement. The eviction letter lay on the mattress edges, soft and fuzzy from my nervous fingers folding it over and over, hoping the friction might change the text. It never worked. 14 days. That was the countdown remaining in this shoebox room that smelled of damp rot and the ghost of a neighbor's cigarette smoke bleeding through the drywall. 14 days before I became just another shadow in a doorway, invisible to the commuters rushing toward their real lives. 21 years of age and 0 to show for it. Ren Calloway is the name, though it always felt like a loner, a temporary tag on an unclaimed package. The state took custody when I was 6. I spent 15 years as a parcel shipped to 4 different addresses. Nothing stuck. Nothing was designed to. Mom was killed in a wreck when I was 6. The memories are worn thin now, just shards of golden sunlight hitting the kitchen tiles that morning. The press of her lips on my forehead, her voice promising she'd be back by supper. She smelled of vanilla extract and dark roast coffee. She wore this oversized blue knit I used to bury my face in when the world got too loud. We had a date to bake chocolate chip cookies that night, to eat them straight off the tray while the chocolate was still molten. She never made it back. A patrol car pulled up instead. Officer, twisting his cap in his hands, wearing that heavy look. You learn that expression fast, the mask adults wear when they're about to shatter a kid's world. After the funeral, the caseworkers broke the news: 0 kin. No grandparents, no aunts, no distant cousins stepping up to claim a grieving boy. I was on my own, they said. But the system would be my safety net. That net was full of holes. It bounced me from roof to roof, stranger to stranger. Every stop a reminder that I was a puzzle piece from the wrong box. The Hendersons were first decent people just drowning. 3 fosters already, 2 biologicals, and not enough hours or heart to cover the spread. I mastered the art of silence there. Shrink down, occupy 0 space, become invisible, so you don't become a burden. Family number 2 saw a monthly paycheck. Took me a minute to spot the grift, but I got there. The way they measured out food portions, the ill-fitting hand-me-downs, the padlock clicking onto the pantry at night. I endured 2 years of that before a caseworker spotted the bruises. The third home, the Marshalls. They were the heartbreak. Young, optimistic, tossing around the word adoption like a promise. For 6 months, I let myself visualize painting bedroom walls a color I picked. A real Christmas with stockings that had my name stitched on them, people I could call Mom and Dad. Then came the baby news. I can still see them sitting on my bed looking guilty, but mostly relieved to be shedding the spare. Apologies all around, but they needed the room for the nursery. Surely a big kid like me understood. They insisted my forever family was still out there. I was 12. That's when I quit believing in destiny. The final placement was adequate. That's the best word. Adequate. They kept me fed and dry and ignored me. Your grandmother has passed. She left the estate to you. Impossible. I don't have family, which was the only thing I craved back then. I aged out of their house on my 18th birthday with a trash bag of laundry, a GED certificate, and a small grant for community college. For 2 years, I tricked myself into thinking I had traction. I grinded at 2 jobs, studied late, kept my head down. I was going to be the anomaly, the one who beat the odds. The poster child for the brochure. See, it's possible, you just need grit. Then the grant money evaporated. The math of tuition versus rent versus food didn't balance. Something had to break, and it couldn't be survival. So I sacrificed the future. Dropped out 6 credits shy of the degree. Swore it was temporary, save up, go back, finish the job. But minimum wage is a trap. You don't save, you barely exist. And here I was. 21, 2 weeks from the curb, staring at $127 like faith alone could make it multiply. The phone buzzed. I hesitated. Unknown IDs usually mean debt collectors or scammers, neither of which I had the strength for, but my thumb hit green anyway. Call it despair, or fate, or just the need to hear a human voice before the silence of this empty room swallowed me whole. Is this Ren Calloway? The voice on the line was grit and gravel, sounding like a man who had spent a lifetime breathing dust and open air. Who wants to know? Silence stretched for a beat. Name's Howard Beckett. I was a friend of your grandmother's. A bitter, jagged laugh nearly escaped my throat. I don't have a grandmother. I don't have any family at all. You got the wrong number. He plowed right through my denial. Estelle Calloway. Your mama's mama. She passed on 3 weeks back in Millbrook, Nebraska. I've been hunting for you ever since. Gravity seemed to shift. I sank onto the corner of my bare mattress, hearing the crinkle of the eviction paper beneath my jeans. Impossible, I stammered. When Mom died, the state looked. They told me I was alone. They were wrong. His tone was soft, but it held the weight of iron. Or maybe they just didn't care to look hard enough. Estelle was right there, Wren. Through every single year you spent in the system. She fought for custody, but the red tape strangled every attempt. But she never quit trying, and she never quit loving you. Air wouldn't reach my lungs. It didn't track. None of it made sense. For 10 years I believed I was invisible, just another throwaway kid destined to fall through the cracks and vanish into the gray. Now, this stranger claims someone had been watching, that I was actually wanted, that someone had tried. Why tell me now? My voice was barely a whisper. Because Estelle left it all to you. The farmhouse, 80 acres of dirt and sky, it is yours. She wanted you to have a place to land. She wanted you home. Home. That was a foreign word. I had placements. I had cots in rooms owned by strangers. I borrowed space until I was kicked out. I never owned a single square inch of anything. I don't get it, I said, voice trembling. If she cared, if she tried, why didn't I know? Why was she a ghost? I've asked that same question for a long time, Wren. All I know is she saved every rejection letter, every court filing. It is all waiting here at the farm. You might find your answers in those boxes, but I can't just leave. I can't afford a bus ticket across town, let alone to Nebraska. I'm coming to get you. He said it like he was offering a glass of water, simple, easy. Made a promise to Estelle. It is a 14-hour haul from Portland, but I'll be there. The landlord's threat echoed in my head. You have 60 days. Pay up or get out. I remembered my own stubbornness. I'm not leaving. But Howard just said I've got plenty of time. Can you be ready by the day after tomorrow? I scanned the water damage on the ceiling, the floor mattress, the notice that would kick me out in 2 weeks anyway. What was keeping me here? There was nothing in this city with my name on it. I'll be ready tomorrow. Put yourself in those shoes. 21 years old, pockets empty, and suddenly you learn a ghost has loved you your entire life, leaving you a key to a home you never knew existed. How does that land? Is it relief, rage, mourning? The time that was stolen. Drop a thought below on how you'd handle that bombshell. And stick around because the road trip changed everything. Howard Beckett rolled up at dawn in a faded blue pickup that looked like it rolled off the line before I was born. Rust ate at the fenders and the door groaned like a dying animal when it opened, but the engine purred with a steady, reliable rhythm. He was a beanpole of a man pushing 70 with skin turned to leather by decades of wind and open sky. But his eyes were gentle, framed by deep crow's feet carved by a lifetime of easy smiles. He wore soft, washed-out flannel and jeans, his hands thick with the calluses of a man who worked the soil. "Spitting image of her," he murmured as I tossed my 2 bags onto the floorboard. My entire earthly existence fit in that footwell. "Your mama, I mean. But you've got Estelle's eyes." "How could she know?" I asked as we merged onto the highway, pointing the nose of the truck east. "She had her ways. Tracked down school portraits, scraped pictures off the internet as you got older. Got them framed on every wall in the house. You'll see." The concrete sprawl began to fade behind us. Portland's gray silhouette shrank in the side mirror until it was just a smudge on the horizon. I had spent my life there, yet I felt nothing leaving it. It wasn't my city, just a holding cell I was passing through. We pulled into a truck stop deep in Wyoming, one of those places where time seems to stop. The overhead fluorescents hummed, bathing the diner in a sickly jaundice yellow. The coffee tasted like scorched earth and the pie was dry, but I wolfed it down. It was the first hot meal I had seen in days. Howard sat opposite me in the torn vinyl booth nursing his mug. "Your mama," he said out of the blue, "was a real firecracker. Did anyone ever mention that to you?" I gave a small shake of my head. Not a soul had ever breathed a word about the woman who gave birth to me. The temporary homes were strangers to her ghost, and the caseworkers saw nothing but data points, sterile files listing a birthday, a death day, and a blank space where family should have been. She had a fire in her fast to ignite, but just as quick to turn into joy. Estelle compared her to a July thunderstorm, wild, gorgeous, and gone too soon. He paused to nurse his coffee. "But make no mistake, that girl adored you with every fiber she had. Your grandmother let me read the mail she got after you arrived. Reams of paper detailing every single move you made. From the first time you grinned to that first tooth coming in, or how you'd latch onto her pinky like a vice. I kept my eyes fixed on the table, finding my voice had deserted me. After the crash, it almost took Estelle, too. Her heart kept beating, sure, but the spirit inside her, it shattered. You were the last piece of her child she had to hold on to, and they stripped you from her arms. Why? The question clawed its way out of my throat, raw and painful. Why couldn't I stay? Howard let out a heavy breath. The state doesn't factor in affection, Wren. They look at checkboxes: how old you are, how far away you live, how much money is in the bank. She was 72, running a Nebraska homestead by herself. You were stuck in Oregon, more than 1,000 miles out of reach. The judge called it impractical. That word almost drew a bitter chuckle from me, though the situation held zero humor. I wasted a lifetime bouncing between houses of people who didn't know me, all because staying with my own blood didn't make logistical sense to someone in a suit. It was a sin. Every soul in Millbrook knew it was a twisted injustice. But recognizing a wrong and having the power to right it don't always go hand in hand. She fought tooth and nail, drained her savings account dry paying for legal counsel, flew out to the coast for hearings more times than I can tally, but the machine had already made up its mind. And once the government sets a course, turning them around is about as easy as digging a tunnel through granite with a teaspoon. We fell quiet, then staring out at the rigs rumbling through the asphalt lot. Somewhere ahead, beyond the endless stretch of blacktop and prairie, waited a patch of earth that was mine by right. An ancestor who had cherished me from afar without me ever suspecting a thing. An entire history I had been blind to. We kept driving as the sun went down. I drifted in and out of a restless sleep, blinking awake occasionally to see strange terrain blurring by the glass. The sharp peaks of this Wyoming range softened into gentle slopes before finally leveling out into the infinite flatlands of the Cornhusker State. When morning broke, we were adrift in a sea of agriculture crops running to the edge of the world, interrupted only by the lonely silhouette of a barn or a grain tower watching over the sunrise. "You're in wheat territory now," Howard murmured. "Been that way for a century. Your great-granddaddy staked the first claim back in 1902, started with 40 acres and a sod hut. This dirt has been under your family's fingernails for 4 to 8. I'm terrified I'm going to lose it all. I haven't got a clue how to run a farm. No one starts out an expert, but you aren't in this by yourself. Generations. 4 lifetimes of history. I wasn't just drifting, I came from a source. I had an anchor, even if I was just now discovering the chain." The realization felt bizarre, miraculous, and agonizing all at the same time. "Tell me about her," I said. "Not the grandmother part, just who was she? As if you were painting a picture for a stranger." Howard's face softened, a warmth lighting up his gaze. Hard-headed. God, that woman was obstinate. The moment she set her heels, the discussion was over. You couldn't sway her, couldn't talk her off the ledge. Her late husband always joked that debating Estelle was like yelling at a tornado. You could scream until you were blue, but the storm was going to do what it wanted anyway. What else? Decent. Aggressively decent. She would hand over her last coat in a blizzard and act like she was too warm anyway. There isn't a family in Wheeler County that doesn't owe her a debt of some sort. She fronted cash when the loan officer slammed the door. She brought casseroles when folks fell ill. She was out in the fields pulling corn when a neighbor was down a man. He shot a look in my direction. That is the reason everyone is holding their breath for your arrival. They adored her, and they are ready to pour that same affection onto you. I couldn't find the words to respond. Genuine care wasn't exactly something I had a track record with. It felt like a dialect everyone else had mastered while I couldn't even manage the alphabet. "Here is your exit," Howard announced, gesturing toward a gravel drive guarded by a beaten-up post. The name Callaway was scrawled on the metal, the paint so sun-bleached it was barely visible against the rust. "It is a mile in from here." My pulse began to hammer against my ribs. Stones popped under the rubber wheels, kicking up a cloud of silt that walled off everything I used to know. Unkempt tall grass flanked the lane, whispering against the metal door panels as we pushed through. You could tell nobody had taken a scythe to this path in a long time. Then the homestead emerged from the haze and the air stuck in my chest. The main house anchored the land, a 2-story timber frame wearing a coat of white that was flaking away like dead skin after a bad burn. The veranda slumped heavily to the left, and sheets of silvered plywood covered the glass in several window frames. Yet despite the rot and the ruin, the place possessed a quiet dignity. It had stared down 80 years of blizzards and droughts and refused to buckle. Past the residence, a barn that might have once been red leaned precariously, its roof a patchwork of holes. The timber fencing that used to define the yard had long ago surrendered to gravity. Fence pickets jutted from the earth at odd angles, resembling a jagged broken smile, guarding an ocean of crops that spanned the horizon. Golden stalks danced in the early sun, shivering in the breeze as if they breathed. 80 acres, Howard murmured beside me. She's rough around the edges. Going to take some sweat to fix, but the foundation doesn't lie. This soil, those beams, they're built to last. I eased out of the cab, wincing as my joints protested the 14-hour haul. The atmosphere felt changed, heavier, yet cleaner. It carried the perfume of wet soil and harvest, untouched by city smog or the sour stench of alley trash. No crushing crowds here, only the vast open dome of the heavens and the whisper of the prairie. I drifted toward the homestead, feeling like a ghost moving through a memory. Wood groaned beneath my boots on the stairs. I checked each plank's strength before trusting it to hold me. A horseshoe-shaped brass knocker, darkened by time yet unyielding, centered the entry. "Here," Howard said, appearing at my shoulder with a ring of metal. "Belonged to Estelle. The large brass one opens this main entrance." My fingers shook as I guided the metal into the keyhole. The tumbler fought me, seized by rust and neglect, until it suddenly yielded with a sharp snap that rang out over the silent farmland. I shoved the timber barrier aside. Immediately, the aroma enveloped me, ancient lumber settling dust and a deeper, sweeter note buried beneath. A mix of dried lavender and yeast, the olfactory ghost of a lifetime spent within these walls. Shadows claimed the foyer, broken only by dusty beams, slicing through grime-coated panes, revealing the skeleton of a staircase and the mouths of adjoining chambers. "Power's on," Howard mentioned from the threshold. I made sure the account stayed current after she left us. "Thought you might need it. Try the toggle to your right." I fumbled along the wall until my fingers grazed the plastic and snapped it upward. The ceiling bulb sputtered, then held, illuminating a corridor lined with glass frames. The air left my lungs. Every single face on that wall was mine, an infant version of myself cradled by a woman with silver hair and a gentle gaze. A snapshot of me as a toddler cackling at an unseen joke. My toothless, clumsy grin from primary school, a photo I barely recalled. Another from junior high, posturing with a desperate attempt at coolness. A teenage portrait in front of a group home, wearing a brittle, hollow smile that never touched my gaze. Images I never knew had been taken. Fragments of a personal history I had long since abandoned to the void. Yet there they hung, mounted with reverence by a stranger who had evidently carried me in her heart through every sunrise and sunset. She hunted them down by any means necessary, Howard whispered, tracked down duplicate school portraits, scoured the internet. The infant shot was the sole original. She told me your mom mailed it to her 7 days after you arrived. She valued that scrap of paper above gold. I crept down the corridor, studying each frozen second of my past. I watched myself age in sequence, a lone figure drifting among transient guardians in houses that were never homes. Yet someone here had consecrated those lost years, a woman who claimed me as kin, who desired my presence and refused to forget. "Sleeping quarters are up top," Howard noted. "However, you need to visit Estelle's room first. There is something waiting for you." He guided me through a parlor of shrouded furniture and by a kitchen where plates sat drying, frozen in time, as if the washer had just stepped out, until we reached a rear door. The sanctuary was modest. A metal bed frame supported a quilt washed out to pale azure and ivory. A timber bureau stood guard its looking glass, fogged by the march of decades. A rocker faced the glass, angled to survey the crops. Beneath the mattress, Howard directed, locate the shifting plank beside the side table. That was her vault for things that mattered. I dropped to my knees, sweeping my fingers across the grain until wood wobbled beneath my skin. With gentle pressure, I leveraged it open. Resting in the dark was a battered metal container, its lid adorned with floral art. Though the pigment was flaking and sun-bleached, the shapes of roses and forget-me-nots were unmistakable. My trembling hands raised the vessel to the mattress. The cover resisted, then popped free, exposing a treasure that made my pulse freeze. Correspondence. Stacks of it. Every envelope inscribed, "To my darling Wren," the penmanship deteriorating from firm loops to tremulous scratches as the years advanced. Early missives had turned amber and brittle, feeling like dried leaves, while others appeared fresh and crisp. Each one was glued shut, unsent, yet crafted with undeniable devotion. 147 of them. I tallied the sum that night. A dispatch for nearly every 7-day cycle of my exile. I grasped the initial envelope dating back to the moment the system swallowed me. The paper felt like velvet, the script ghosting away. I breached the seal with reverence and started to absorb the words. My dearest Ren, the judge told me today that you cannot be mine. They claimed my years are too many, that the distance between states is too vast, and that people you don't know will raise you better than your own kin. I wept for every mile of the return journey. 14 hours of sorrow until I ran dry. I know this makes no sense to you. You are only 7 and everything you know has shattered. I would give anything to embrace you and promise that peace will find you again. My heart aches to comb your hair, cook your morning meal, and pull the blankets up to your chin when the sun goes down. My heart aches to sit by your bedside reading tales and teaching you to knead dough, watching you blossom into the remarkable woman I know resides within. But the powers that be keep us apart. Since I cannot speak to you, I will write. Each week I shall pen a testament to my devotion. Perhaps one day these pages will find you, and you will understand that solitude was never your true state. You were cherished daily. Even in the silence, my darling, I am battling for you. I am striving to bring you home. If I fail, these notes remain a way for me to be your grandmother, bridging the distance between us. My love exceeds the capacity of language. Eternally yours, Grandma Estelle. The ink blurred as my eyes welled up. I collapsed on the floorboards of her sanctuary, clutching 15 years of devotion in my trembling hands, and broke down. I cried for the child who felt discarded. I cried for the woman who spent her life reaching out only to pass away before her grasp could hold me. I mourned the stolen years, the unbaked treats, and the bedtime stories that never found a voice. Weeping for the mundane magic we were denied, I wept for the totality of the loss. Howard remained in the threshold, a silent guardian allowing me my grief. When I finally lifted my gaze, smearing tears across my cheek, he offered a slow nod. "Take all the time you need," he murmured. "Read them at your own pace. The house stands firm, and you can too if you wish." He withdrew then, and the rumble of his truck engine faded down the gravel drive, returning to his own life. Twilight stretched across the room, bathing me in shadow amidst a sea of letters I never knew existed in a home that somehow belonged to me. I read through the darkness, page after page, year upon year, witnessing the decay of her penmanship as the sickness advanced. The beginning was radiant with hope. She detailed the farm, the room she was preparing, and the future we would share. "I put sunflowers in the earth this spring," she wrote when I was 8. "By summer, they will tower over you. I picture you darting through the stalks, laughter trailing behind you. Someday, Ren, someday you will witness this. Your mother held a deep affection for this soil," she noted, "when I was 10, though she lamented the quiet as a youth. She craved the pulse of the city, yet I believe she yearned for this peace once she was gone. Perhaps that pull resides in you as well. It is in the blood." As time marched on, the tone shifted. The optimism dimmed, replaced by resignation, though the affection remained fierce. "Age is claiming me, darling," she penned at my 16th year. "Fine motor tasks are becoming a struggle. The physicians have named it Parkinson's disease. I yearn to see you as an adult, to embrace you once more, but doubt is creeping in. Should I fail, know that my vigil never ceased. I loved you every sunrise and every sunset." The final envelope was dated 3 months prior to her passing. The script was frantic, wavering lines fighting across the paper. "Reen, my sweet girl, I sit at the table where your mother once studied. The morning sun is exquisite. It lies like honey upon the wheat. I ache for you to see it. I realize I may be gone when you finally arrive. The illness moves swiftly. But Howard has sworn an oath to find you. I have faith in him. He will guide you here. He will reveal the truth held in these pages. You were never cast aside, never forgotten. I waged war for you, my darling. I exhausted my fortune searching. When funds ran dry, I maintained this farm for you. Kept your sanctuary waiting. Kept writing, even when the pen felt like lead. This soil is my legacy to you. Not merely the dirt and timber, but the devotion required to keep it whole. Every post I mended for you. Every seed I sowed for you. Every dusk I witnessed from the veranda, I witnessed with you in my heart. Build a life here, Ren, or liquidate it and find your path elsewhere. Whatever your choice, know you are cherished, always and forever. Grandma Estelle. I lowered the page, scanning the room. The brass bed frame that held her dreams for 50 years. The rocker, where she likely sat gazing at my school portraits. The pane of glass framing the fields she tended in solitude, waiting for a granddaughter who never appeared. She battled for me. She sacrificed everything to bring me home. And when the bureaucracy blocked her, she did not surrender. She simply transmuted her love into the land. Outside, dawn broke over Nebraska. The horizon blushed pink, then amber, then turquoise, a piercing blue. The wheat rippled in the breeze, a living, breathing ocean stretching to the edge of the world. A choice lay before me. I could liquidate the estate and return to Portland. I could restart with a safety net this time. It was the logical path, the safe path. Or I could remain. I committed myself to inhabiting a crumbling homestead that required an endless list of renovations. I planted my feet in a village where every face was a stranger's. Remaining here to resurrect the wreckage my grandmother bequeathed to me was the mission. Honestly, walking away was never on the table. The thought of leaving never even flickered. Estelle had spent a lifetime anticipating my return. Sticking it out was the absolute minimum I owed her memory. That initial week at the estate crushed me with burdens I hadn't foreseen. I was woefully out of my depth. My childhood belonged to concrete jungles and subdivisions confined to flats and cookie-cutter units where home repair meant dialing a superintendent. My agricultural resume began and ended with a few basil plants shivering on a windowsill during a stint in foster care. And even those withered away after I neglected the watering can for a fortnight. Suddenly, I was the custodian of 80 acres, a residence demanding a complete gut job from shingles to pipes and an outbuilding so fragile a strong breeze might level it. Sleep evaded me completely during that solitary debut evening. The gloom magnified the soundscape gales shaking free planks, unseen creatures scurrying behind plaster, and the groans of century-old timber adjusting its weight. Paralyzed by the thought of the upstairs chambers, I camped out on the parlor floor, eyes fixed on the plaster above until sunrise broke. Solitude, however, was fleeting. 2 days in a battered rig rumbled up the access road, trailing a cloud of grit through the dawn light. From the veranda, I observed a figure emerge, likely in his early 70s, sporting sun-etched skin and a mane of snowy hair overdue for a trim. Clad in dungarees and heavy stompers, he moved with the deliberate caution of a man whose knees remembered a lifetime of labor. "I reckon you're Wren." Pausing at the stair's base, he spoke in a tone that was rough yet gentle, reminding me of grit overlaid on velvet. "Name's Gus Thornton. My property lines butt up against yours eastward. Your grandmother and I shared a fence line for 40 years. Pleasure to finally meet. We didn't come empty-handed." He nodded toward the vehicle where a female passenger was exiting, balancing a wrapped casserole. "My girl Della wouldn't take no for an answer. Figured you've been starving since you pulled in." His assessment was spot on. My diet had consisted entirely of dry biscuits and nut spread from the local bodega. Della. Thornton looked to be about 24, her raven locks secured in a no-nonsense tie, wearing a warm grin that instantly dissolved my isolation. Medical fatigues peeked out from her coat, suggesting she'd just clocked out. "Chicken and dumplings," she announced, passing the heavy vessel to me. "It's an heirloom formula. Be careful it's dense enough to anchor a ship, but that's the comfort of it." Her expression brightened. "Any trouble, you holler? We're just 2 miles down the eastern road. I work shifts at the village clinic, but Pop's usually home." In the ensuing days, a parade of locals materialized. It felt as though a flare had been fired, summoning the entire township to my aid. Oppo Kramer, the proprietor of the mercantile, arrived with a crate of essentials and refused a single cent. A woman of 58 or so, with silver-streaked hair, her dexterous fingers made short work of stocking my shelves. "Estelle patronized my shop for 3 decades, she countered when I tried to open my wallet. "Consider this a small return on investment. If you run low, just swing by. We can settle the tab down the road or forget it entirely. Makes no difference to me." Then there was Frank Jessup, the ironmonger, who dropped in with equipment and guidance on structural triage. He chaperoned me around the grounds, distinguishing between critical failures and cosmetic projects. "That canopy is job 1, he noted, eyes narrowed at the gaps in the slate. "Frost will be here before you know it, and you don't want a living room full of slush. I'm sitting on some surplus stock from a previous contract. Swing past in the morning, we'll fill your bed." Even Roy, the reserved courier who navigated his route in a beat-up utility vehicle, began attaching handwritten scripts to my invoices. "Welcome to Millbrook. Your grandmother was the salt of the earth. Don't hesitate to reach out. Folks here look out for one another." This was the antithesis of the metropolis where fellow tenants were ghosts averting their gaze in the lift. Here, presence was a promise. They arrived with sustenance and sweat equity, displaying authentic joy at my residency. Estelle left her mark on plenty of souls. Gus murmured one twilight as we observed the daylight fading from the veranda. He'd become a fixture, visiting daily to audit my work and offer counsel when I hit a wall. 5 years back, when I lost the missus, I was ready to throw in the towel. Everything felt hollow, but your grandma, she knocked on my door daily for 2 solid months. Forced me to feed myself, dragged me out of the sheets, and just sat in silence when the grief was loud. I reckon I'm still breathing because of her. She sounds incredible. That she was. And you were her favorite topic. Paraded your photos around like trophies. We all heard about that final letter she penned. You're no stranger to us, Wren. We've been praying you'd find your way back. Absorbing their compassion proved more difficult than enduring the physical toil. I had armored myself against the world for so long, anticipating zero support, that true benevolence felt alien, even suspect. I stayed braced for the blow, waiting for the hidden agenda the moment someone would finally present the bill for their kindness. It never happened. These folks showed up simply because that is who they were. They were repaying a lifetime of quiet debts owed to Estelle, keeping her spirit alive through action. Out here in Millbrook, neighbor isn't just a noun, it is a survival strategy. 3 days and a beat-up county truck rumbled up my drive. The woman behind the wheel looked to be about 40, sporting a no-nonsense haircut and clutching a clipboard that had survived a war or two. Wren Calloway, I'm Nayan Welchover from the Wheeler County Extension Office. Howard mentioned you might be drowning a bit. Thought I'd swing by. I ushered her inside, cheeks burning at the wreck I was living in. Dust bunnies in the corners boxes, spewing contents, and a sleeping bag on the floor because I couldn't bring myself to claim any bedroom as my own yet. If Nayan saw the chaos, she didn't show it. She had the grace to look right past the mess. Grandmother left you the homestead then? She asked, pulling out a kitchen chair like she had sat there 1,000 times. 80 acres, give or take, that is the word around town. Good dirt. Estelle ran a tight ship considering. Wheat needs work, but the bones are good. Water rights are secure. She scribbled something on her battered clipboard. What is the game plan? I let out a laugh that sounded sharper than I meant. Plan? I didn't know this place was on a map until last week. I couldn't grow a weed, let alone a crop. Nan just nodded, unfazed. You and half the generation. That is why, hey, Mercy, I am here. The Extension Office has resources. We run workshops on crops, livestock, soil chemistry. Plus there is money out there for fresh starts, grants, low-interest loans. The USDA has entire departments dedicated to keeping folks like you from going under. She fished a sheaf of pamphlets from her bag. Read these when you get a minute. This development program for new ranchers is likely your best bet. Covers up to $12,000 for gear sheds training. $12,000. A week back, that sum would have felt like a fantasy. Now, it felt like oxygen. Steep learning curve, Nan went on. This life isn't for the faint of heart. Sky turns on you, prices tank, machinery quits the day you need it most, but we manage. Estelle held this ground for 40 years solo. You know how the people. Solitary confinement doesn't work in Wheeler County. We lean on each other. Tractor dies, a neighbor brings theirs. Get laid up during harvest, the town brings the crop in. That is how Estelle made it after your granddad passed. It is how you will take it, too. She stood up, leaving the paperwork and a promise to return in a couple of weeks. Watching her taillights fade, I felt a strange warmth in my chest. Hope. Tiny, fragile, but undeniable. If you are still listening, I have a question. Have you ever landed in a strange place only to be caught by a safety net of strangers? Folks who owed you nothing but gave you everything. I would really like to read your stories below. And hit that subscribe button to follow the journey. Because just as I found my footing, the ground fell out from under me. The trouble arrived in week 2. I was out wrestling a broken fence line, failing miserably, but refusing to surrender when a black Mercedes crept up the drive. It looked like a spaceship landed in the dust. Polished chrome and city arrogance against the dirt road. That car cost more than my lifetime earnings. The guy who got out was just as jarring. Mid-40s suit that cost a fortune, hair gelled within an inch of its life. He walked with the swagger of a man who owns the room, tiptoeing around mud puddles to save his Italian leather. Miss Calloway. He held out a hand soft as a baby's. Barrett Crane, we need to have a chat. I kept my hands to myself. My gut was already screaming danger. Chat about what, the dirt? He swept a hand toward the house, the barn, the rolling wheat. I am in property development. I was in deep talks with your grandmother. We had a deal. Ice water hit my veins. What sort of deal? He produced a folded paper from his jacket. Estelle agreed to sell this land to my firm 3 months back. Here is the contract. He passed it over. Tragedy struck before we closed, which leaves us in a bind. I opened the document. It looked legitimate, heavy with legalese I couldn't parse. Walls of text, but there at the bottom was the signature Estelle Calloway in her steady, undeniable hand. Per the agreement, Barrett said smooth as oil, we already placed a deposit of $52,000 in escrow. Since your grandmother passed before finalizing the deal, that deposit is now a debt against her estate. You have two choices: repay it, or we move forward with the sale. My throat tightened, the air suddenly thin. $52,000. I know this is heavy news, the man said, his voice practiced and smooth. She likely kept it to herself, but the paperwork is legally binding. You have 60 days. Settle the debt or sign over the deed. I stared at the document, words swimming before my eyes. Why would Estelle have done this? Why agree to sell the very soil she had guarded for me, the sanctuary she described in every letter, the fields she plowed alone, the legacy she intended for me? It didn't add up. I don't have $52,000, I whispered. I don't even have 52. Barrett offered a smile that didn't touch his gaze. I understand. That is why I am prepared to offer a solution that benefits us both. I will purchase the property right now for $80,000. Given the disrepair, that is more than generous. You walk away with cash in hand. No lawyers involved, no messy complications, a clean break. $80,000. It was a sum vast enough to change the trajectory of my life. Enough to return to Portland, finish my studies, and start fresh somewhere unburdened by dust and memories. Yet it felt hollow. A betrayal. I need time, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'm staying in town. You have my contact information. He pressed a sleek business card into my palm. Don't take too long. 60 days evaporates faster than you might expect. And if we are forced to settle this in court, he added with a casual shrug, it becomes expensive for everyone involved. He climbed back into his silver Mercedes and drove off, leaving me stranded in the driveway with a contract I couldn't comprehend and a burden I couldn't lift. I remained there long after the dust settled, the contract crinkling inside my clenched fist. $52,000. 60 days. A stranger in a tailored suit declaring I was about to lose the only history I had left. What would you do if you stood on that gravel clutching a piece of paper that threatened to erase your only home? Would you dig your heels in? Would you take the money? Would you run and never look back? I need to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Tell me how you would handle this, and please subscribe because the next chapter nearly destroyed me. But it also taught me the true definition of community. That evening, I laid the papers out for Gus. His expression hardened as he scanned the lines, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. This sits wrong, he murmured. What do you see? I asked. The signature, he said, tapping a thick finger on Estelle's name. Look at it. Steady, clear. Wren, your grandmother hasn't been able to write like this for 2 years. The Parkinsons had her hands shaking so violently she struggled to lift a teacup, let alone sign a legal document with this precision. This looks like the hand of a healthy woman. A fragile hope sparkled in my chest. You think it's a forgery? I think we need to be sure. I spent a lot of time with Estelle near the end. She never spoke a word about selling. Not about developers, and certainly not about anyone named Barrett Crane. He placed the paper on the table and looked at me. If she had made a deal like this, she would have shared it. She would have told me, but proof, that's the tricky part. Gus paused. Estelle kept everything. Every bill, every receipt. There are boxes stacked in the attic and her study. We start digging there. We need a sample of her actual handwriting from those final months. By morning, Della arrived to join the hunt. We hauled heavy dust-coated boxes downstairs, spreading the archives of a lifetime across the floorboards. Decades of farm ledgers, tax returns, and Christmas cards. The paper trail of a woman who never left her land. Then, in a forgotten carton, we found it. A receipt from the general store dated just 2 months before her passing. The signature at the bottom was a ghost of her name. Trembling, jagged lines that drifted off the line. It bore no resemblance to the bold, confident autograph on Barrett's contract. This is her, Della said softly, holding the receipt to the sunlight. There is physically no way she signed that deal. These aren't even distant cousins. The knot in my chest began to unravel. Gus was right. Barrett Crane was a fraud, though exposing him would be a different war entirely. The following weeks turned into a siege. Barrett returned twice, ramping up the pressure. His first visit, he bumped the offer to $90,000. Be practical, Miss Calloway. You're young. You don't know the first thing about running a farm. Why shackle yourself to a crumbling money pit in the middle of nowhere? Take the cash. Build a real life. By his second visit, the veneer of kindness had vanished. His tone was brittle, the smile erased. I have handled these situations before. People think good intentions and stubborn pride can beat city lawyers. It never ends well for them. Take the check. Walk away. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I turned them down twice, yet the danger hung over me. I spent my nights, sleepless eyes fixed on the plaster above, mentally tallying the figures over and over. 60 days. $52,000. A judicial maze I couldn't comprehend and certainly couldn't pay my way through. Doubts crept in. Suppose I had misjudged. Suppose I stood my ground only to be left with nothing. In the midst of that fear, Della put me in touch with a group offering pro bono counsel to agricultural workers. A fresh-faced lawyer, Marcus Chen, volunteered to review the details. Barely my senior, he wore a look of exhaustion, the kind that comes from shouldering too many burdens simply because nobody else would. The handwriting doesn't match at all, he noted during our call, having scanned the paperwork. Factor in the clinical charts tracking her Parkinson's decline, plus the neighbor's accounts, and we're looking at a solid fraud argument. I need to be straight with you, though, Ren. These battles aren't quick, and Crane, he's got deep pockets. He could stall forever, drowning you in filings and costs until you fold. I asked what my options were. You stand your ground. It was the only decision that made sense. Yet time was a luxury I lacked. That 60-day limit approached like an oncoming hurricane. Sleep became a stranger. I lay there in the dark, terrified that my entire world was about to vanish. This land, Estelle saved a sanctuary. I was just starting to understand all of it, precarious, threatened by a wealthy predator in tailored clothing intent on theft. Yet a shift occurred parallel to the fear, a development I never foresaw. My resistance sparked something in the locals. Gus arranged a gathering at the municipal building. Close to 40 souls arrived to learn the truth about Barrett Crane's deceit. They packed the benches resembling a Sunday congregation. The expression in this room was grave-focused. Many there carried their own scars from similar battles. Martha, a widow, advanced in years, shared how she was coerced into selling 24 months prior. A separate firm, but identical methods, confusing paperwork, rushed timelines, and intimidation. Then there was Bill, a grower slapped with dubious citations immediately following his rejection of a developer's bid. The citations were eventually thrown out, but not before bleeding him of thousands in attorney costs. "This has been his playbook for ages," a voice called out from the rear. Preying on the elderly, the isolated, the weak, exploiting those who can't afford to defend themselves. "That ends now," Gus declared, his tone resonating against the walls. "Not here, not with us." The group began to excavate the truth, ringing up neighboring districts, requesting archives, and reaching out to victims in other towns who knew Crane's name. Inside of 2 weeks, they uncovered 4 additional instances of likely deception, everyone following the exact same script. Each victim was a senior landowner. Each document bore a signature that looked too perfect. Consequently, the sheriff launched an official inquiry. Late one night, sifting through the remainder of Estelle's archives, I stumbled upon a discovery that shifted the entire landscape. I was rummaging through an unchecked cabinet in her study, hoping to find more samples of her script. The lowest compartment was jammed. I had to yank it with force to break the seal. Resting there was a heavy manila file, wedged behind ancient tax forms as if meant to stay forgotten. I retrieved it and spread the contents across the workspace. The top sheet was a legal plea lodged in the Multnomah County Circuit Court, Oregon, stamped 14 years prior, 3 months following my mother's crash. Estelle Marie Calloway was named as the petitioner. Standing as the defendant was the Oregon Department of Human Services. The title declared a request for guardianship of a minor, Wren Elizabeth Calloway. Howard had mentioned the custody war, but holding the physical proof was different. I never truly grasped the magnitude of her fight. The file contained endless sheets testimonials, including a note from Pastor Mitchell calling Estelle the most dedicated, competent woman he knew, possessing a boundless capacity for love. There was a declaration from her physician attesting to her robust health and total ability to raise a young girl. A fiscal report verified she held full title to her land and possessed enough funds to provide for me. Then came the invoices. Edward Marshall Counsel. First meeting, $500. Administrative costs, $350. Tribunal representations, $2,000, $3,000, $500, $4,200. Flight and lodging for Oregon, testimonies $1,800. Specialist retainers, $3,000. Sheet after sheet of debits. I tallied the sum mentally, then recounted certain I had erred. $23,417. She had poured over $23,000 into the battle to bring me home. I pressed on, reading the verbatim records of 3 distinct hearings. Her counsel contended that she was the sole surviving bloodkin, insisting that she possessed both the resources and the heart to offer a secure life, and that uniting the girl with her grandmother was the only righteous path. The state attorney argued that Estelle was too advanced in years, that the distance from Nebraska to Oregon was insurmountable, and that severing the bond I had supposedly formed with the foster family would inflict deeper wounds. It was a complete fabrication. I hadn't connected with a single soul. I was hollowed out, shell-shocked, marking time until a savior arrived, convinced I was unwanted and utterly solitary. Yet, while I felt abandoned, she was waging war for me in a courtroom 1,000 miles away. The last paper in the stack was the verdict. I read the text 3 times, every sentence slicing like a shard of glass. Although the court recognizes the petitioner's genuine intent to raise her granddaughter, we are bound by precedents regarding the child's optimal welfare. The applicant is 72 years of age and resides over 1,000 miles from the minor's current placement. Moving the child at this critical developmental stage would interrupt her schooling and strip away the safety net she currently relies on in her present environment. The request for guardianship is denied, their so-called safety net. They meant the carousel of temporary houses, the caseworkers too swamped to remember the day I was born, and the people who looked at me and saw a monthly check rather than a girl starved for affection. That was the future they chose over my own flesh and blood. Buried at the back of the file was a note from Edward Marshall, written a week after the judgment. Dear Mrs. Calloway, I understand the heartbreak this decision brings. You left no stone unturned. In 2 decades of practicing family law, I have rarely witnessed such a tenacious defense of a child. This is a failure of the state, not of you. Judges are often hesitant to grant custody to the elderly, especially across state borders, ignoring the stability that deep love can provide. Justice is not always just, and your situation exposes the machinery's deepest cracks. Know this, your struggle is now part of Wren's permanent record. Should she one day look for answers, she will find proof that she was cherished, desired, and fiercely defended. It offers little solace today, but it may become her lifeline in the future. I have attached the full case history for your archives. Account balance is 0. Yours faithfully, Edward Marshall, Attorney at Law. I sat there at her old writing table, drowning in the paper trail of a war I never knew she waged. She had drained her bank accounts, flown to Oregon 3 separate times, retained counsel, and rallied witnesses. She exhausted every avenue available to a human being. And it still wasn't enough. Not for lack of capability or love, nor because strangers offered a better home, but simply because her hair was gray and the map was too wide. Bureaucracy decided those were valid reasons to sever our tie. My mind drifted to the hollow years that came after. The couple that almost signed the adoption papers before getting cold feet. The Hendersons who had good hearts, but too many chaotic kids. The house where I mastered the art of disappearing. The one where I learned that grown-ups are dangerous. None of that had to happen. I should have been raised among these giant sunflowers and rippling wheat fields with a grandmother who baked sweets, read fairy tales, and offered love without strings attached. Instead, I got administrative folders, temporary beds, and a system that gave me an ID number where my identity should have been. Meanwhile, a solitary woman in Nebraska spent a decade on her veranda penning notes to a girl the law forbade her from holding. The dam broke then. It wasn't a gentle weeping, it was a violent, rib-shaking release. It was the torrent of a lifetime's accumulated sorrow finally unleashed by the weight of realizing exactly what had been stolen. That is how Della found me, collapsed over the paperwork buried under evidence of a tragedy. She didn't demand explanations. She simply pulled up a chair, rested a palm between my shoulder blades, and let the storm pass. She tried, I choked out. She gave every dime she had, I know, and they still denied her. The whole thing is rigged. Della's tone was soft, but steel-edged. It was corrupt then, and it hasn't changed. But look at you, Wren. You found your way back. That matters. I stared at the legal wreckage scattered across the wood. The receipts, the correspondence, the waiting. Yeah, I whispered. It matters more than anything. It's heavy, isn't it, realizing a person emptied their life just for a chance to save yours. That they kept swinging even after the bell rang. Have you ever unearthed a secret depth to someone's affection? A silent burden they carried for your sake? Share your experiences below. Don't go anywhere. The darkest chapter is coming up. The tribunal was set for a Thursday in the district court. Sleep was impossible that night, my mind looping endlessly over Marcus's warning. The proof was undeniable. The ink on the page didn't align with the hand that supposedly wrote it, backed by Chart's witnesses and a trail of deceit Crane had left behind him. But money buys noise. He had a team of high-priced suits trained to spin narratives and plant seeds of uncertainty where none should exist. Outcomes aren't promised. The room itself was modest, purely utilitarian, a far cry from the polished mahogany sets you see on television. Just hard timber seats, the hum of overhead tubes, and a weary banner resting in the shadow. Yet, the space felt vast, swallowing me whole. Every scrap of truth I'd unearthed, every fragile hope I'd pieced together over the last few weeks hung in the balance within these four walls. Crane occupied the opposing table, flanked by a pair of attorneys who looked like carbon copies of one another. They traded murmurs and organized their files with the air of men who don't lose. Crane caught my eye, offering a smirk that screamed victory before the battle had even begun. In my corner sat Marcus Chen, a public defender who fought for what was right rather than for a paycheck. Behind me, Gus and Della held the line, a silent wall of support. I clutched my binder of facts, praying it held enough weight to tip the scales. The session opened with the defense laying out their fabrication. They claimed the deed was sound, that their client had come to Mrs. Calloway with an honest heart and a generous price for a burden she couldn't manage. According to them, she put pen to paper with full clarity and intent. Anything else was just hearsay. They insisted a desperate attempt by an heir to back out of a binding deal. Then the floor belonged to us. Marcus lifted a simple sales slip from the local grocer dated only 2 months prior to Estelle's passing. Your Honor, observe the hand of Estelle Calloway from last November. Notice the jagged strokes, the way the ink trails off into nothingness. These are the marks of a nervous system failing under the weight of Parkinson's. He lowered the receipt and raised the document Crane was fighting for. Now compare that to the autograph Mr. Crane alleges she provided in September, a mere 6 weeks prior. Here the hand is steady as a rock, the loops are precise, the tremble is miraculously gone. He laid them out for the bench to see. I have to ask, how does a woman who struggled to lift a teacup suddenly master the art of penmanship? The truth is uncomplicated. She didn't. She couldn't. That name was not written by her hand. Gus took the stand next. He looked out of place in his church suit, folding calloused hands in his lap, yet his resolve to speak for his friend outweighed his unease. I checked on her daily during the end, he told the room. Fetched her food, handled the heavy lifting she was too frail to manage. Not once did she speak of a buyer. Not once did she talk of letting the land go. Her mind was only on Wren. She prayed her girl would return. She wanted a legacy to pass on, something real that the world couldn't strip away. His throat tightened. Estelle Calloway would have sooner died than sell that dirt. It was the last gift she had for the child she spent years waiting for. Anybody claiming otherwise isn't telling you the truth. The magistrate's face had hardened as the old man spoke. When Marcus rested our case, I could see a simmering heat behind the judge's glasses. It wasn't directed at us, but at the vultures across the aisle who tried to pick the bones of a grieving family. Then the tide turned completely. A uniformed officer strode in, bypassing the clerk to hand a sealed envelope directly to the bench. The judge's brow furrowed as he scanned the contents. It seems we have a new situation, he stated flatly. Law enforcement has wrapped up its inquiry into the business dealings of the defendant. Court is in recess for 15 minutes. Crane's mask of indifference finally slipped, and he leaned in to hiss at his counsel. Panic replaced their polish. They scrambled through documents as if a loophole might magically appear. When the magistrate resumed his seat, the air in the room was heavy. I have gone over the sheriff's report, he began. Mr. Crane, this is no longer merely a civil disagreement regarding a single deed. You are the subject of a fraud probe concerning 4 additional estates in this county. Every case mirrors this one falsified paperwork and the exploitation of our vulnerable seniors. Crane bolted upright. Your Honor, these are baseless lies. I run a respectable firm, and I will not. The judge cut him off with a tone like liquid nitrogen. You are digging a deeper hole. Be seated. Crane collapsed back into his chair. Given the testimony heard today and the concurrent criminal findings, I am ruling in favor of the defense. This agreement is declared void ab initio due to fraud. Miss Calloway has no debt or obligation to Mr. Crane's enterprise. The title remains hers, encumbrance-free. A wave of peace washed over me so heavy I felt rooted to the floor. Marcus was gripping my hand, murmuring words of victory, while Gus wrapped me in a bear hug, his rough cheeks slick with weeping. He didn't bother to wipe them away. Beside us, Della was caught somewhere between a sob and a cheer. The metallic snap of steel cuffs broke the silence as I watched the deputy formally detain Barrett Crane. His high-priced legal team scattered like roaches, desperate to disown a man who had suddenly become radioactive to their reputations. "You haven't won anything," Barrett spat, glaring over his shoulder as they hauled him toward the exit. "You're just a stray who stumbled into a jackpot. Is that what you tell yourself?" I rose from my chair, my knees trembling, but my words coming out distinct and unbreakable. "Maybe I don't merit this," I admitted, but my grandmother believed otherwise. She held on to this land for decades, just for me. She drained her savings to get me back here, and she was the finest soul I ever knew. I locked eyes with him. "So, frankly, her opinion carries more weight than yours." The door closed behind him, and finally the deed was truly in my name. The intimidation, the ultimatums, the dread, it all evaporated. No more slick corporate vultures trying to swipe the legacy my grandmother protected with patience and devotion. That evening, the whole neighborhood converged on Opal's general store to mark the victory. It felt like half the county squeezed in, bringing fiddles, casseroles, and endless memories of Estelle. Opal shut down business hours early, shoving display racks against the walls to fit long folding tables groaning under the weight of home-cooked feasts. Crepe paper dangled from the rafters, framing a hand-painted sign that declared "Justice for Estelle" in charmingly uneven script. Martha, the widow. Barrett, nearly swindled 2 years prior, found me near the back and gripped my hands tight. "You managed what I was too afraid to try," she whispered, tears rimming her lashes. "You stood your ground. He's finished hurting people now, thanks to you." I shook my head. It wasn't a solo act. The whole village had my back. That sounds exactly like Estelle. She never sought the spotlight either. Frank Jessup lifted a mason jar of iced tea. "Here's to the Calloway girls' heads harder than granite, the pair of 'em." A roar of laughter rippled through the shop, warm and melodic. I scanned the room, studying features that were once strangers but now felt like home. There was Gus with his leather-tough hands, Della giggling at her dad's joke, and Opal topping off drinks before anyone could ask. Howard observed from the fringe, wearing a quiet grin of contentment. To think 12 months ago, these people were complete ghosts to me. Back then, I was isolated in a cramped apartment, scraping together loose change, convinced I was entirely on my own. Now, I was surrounded by a tribe, blood or not. This was family. Folks who showed up when the chips were down. Gus cleared his throat and hoisted his glass again. "To Estelle Calloway," he rasped, choking up slightly. "The finest neighbor God ever made. And to Wren, who battled tooth and nail to save what she left behind. She'd be beaming right now." "To Estelle," the room chorused. My eyes stayed dry. I'd shed enough tears lately, but her presence was undeniable. She was in the humidity of the crowded room, in the generosity of these neighbors, and in the certainty that I had done right by her name. That is when the truth of Estelle's inheritance hit me. It wasn't the acreage or the savings account. She had bequeathed me a sense of belonging, a circle of people who loved her and by extension had embraced me. 12 months down the road, the homestead looked entirely different. Getting there had been a brutal slog. That first year tested every ounce of my resolve. Yet, as I leaned against the railing of the front porch, surveying my work, the definition of home finally clicked. My first real trial by fire happened in October, scarcely 3 weeks after the court date. I walked out at sunrise to a massacre in the coop. A fox had squeezed through a breach in the wire I had failed to spot, slaughtering half the flock. I froze in the chill morning mist, boots deep in carnage and feathers crushed by the realization of how little I actually knew. Who was I kidding? I wasn't a farmer. I had no clue how to nurture livestock or manage the land. I was just a city imposter playing dress-up, and my ignorance had cost 15 innocent lives because I didn't check a simple fence line. An hour later, Gus discovered me sobbing against the barn wall. "Predator trouble?" he asked, tone flat and practical. I couldn't form words, so I just nodded. It's part of the life. Rookie year is always a beast. Foxes are crafty devils. They exploit gaps you can't even see. He looked over the grim scene hands resting on his belt. "Right then, let's patch this wire so it holds, and I'll bring over some pullets from my place to get your numbers back up." He offered no empty platitudes. He didn't sugarcoat the failure. He simply helped me repair the breach and push onward. I was learning the rhythm of the plains. You don't wallow in tragedy. You shovel up the debris and keep working. The ultimate test arrived in February, riding the back of the fiercest snowstorm Wheeler County had witnessed in 20 years. We lost electricity on a Tuesday and stayed dark for 4 days while the mercury plunged to 15 degrees below zero. Despite my best insulation efforts, the plumbing seized up and I checked the coop constantly, heart in my throat, watching the hens pile on top of each other for warmth. By night number 3, I was huddled in the living room buried under a mountain of quilts, watching my breath turn to ghost smoke in the flickering light. That's when I broke. No silent weeping. Just raw, heaving grief that tore its way out of my chest. The tears came from fear, from the bone-deep cold, and from the overwhelming realization that I was completely out of my depth. I felt like a fraud. Estelle had left me this legacy trusting I could handle it, and it felt like I was letting her memory rot. I came terrifyingly close to quitting right then. I fantasized about ringing up a realtor at dawn, liquidating the lot, and fleeing back to Portland. Back to central heating and pipes that didn't burst, where the only life I had to keep safe was my own. Then the letters crossed my mind. I reached for the battered tin box under my bunk and pulled one out, squinting in the dim glow. It dated back to my 12th year, right after the adoption fell through and the marshals changed their minds. My sweet Wren. She had written. Word reached me that the family decided not to move forward. My heart aches for you. If only I could wrap you up and promise you that you aren't damaged goods. You are worthy of love. Their choice reflects their limitations, not your value. You possess a strength you haven't seen yet, and one day you will find the soil where your roots can take hold. I read those words 3 times while the blizzard battered the windows and the mercury plummeted. I figured if she could hold on to hope for me through a lifetime of letdowns, I could survive one frozen night. Friday brought the electricity back. The plumbing thawed out intact. The flock made it through, and I discovered something vital. I had more grit than I gave myself credit for. That rhythm defined my rookie year. Crises popped up constantly, but neighborly kindness always followed. When the prehistoric water heater died that November, Frank Jessup showed up on my doorstep with a replacement he'd scavenged from an estate sale. He swore it was barely used, even though the casing was dented to hell. When I drowned my first spring garden with too much love and water, Nyan Welch drove over with soil testers and a gentle lesson on drainage. Everyone stumbles out of the gate, she told me. The secret is learning not to trip on the same stone twice. I became a mechanic by necessity. I wrestled with dripping taps, jammed sashes, and a tractor that needed sweet-talking before it would turn over in the frost. I learned which plants thrived in the Wheeler County dirt and which ones were just heartbreaks waiting to happen. I learned to forecast the storm by the gray in the clouds and the silence of the birds. I also got comfortable with failure. The south acreage was a disaster. The corn never stood a chance against the soil chemistry. Nayen broke it down for me. Bad dirt mixed with a late freeze had doomed the seedlings from the start. That cost me the whole harvest and a season of sweat. Then August brought sickness to the herd. The vet called it parasites. We lost 2 goats before the medicine took hold. Digging those graves behind the barn, I wept again. But by then I understood that grief is just another part of the farming life, unspoken but constant. Yet for every setback, something bloomed. The old house began to breathe again. A fresh coat of white and green paint honored Estelle's memory. The roof stopped leaking, thanks to a weekend of hard labor donated by Gus. Gus and his crew. The pipes stopped screaming every time I washed a dish. I rebuilt the porch from the joists up, finishing it off with a flea market swing I'd spent days sanding down to smooth wood. The coop bounced back after the predator attacks. 30 hens were soon laying enough to keep my stall stocked at the Saturday market. Faces became familiar. People learned my name, asked how the homestead was coming along, and bought extra cartons for friends. The garden, pared down to a manageable size, finally offered up a harvest I didn't have to apologize for. I filled the pantry with jars of tomatoes and peppers, preserving the summer just as Estelle had done for 50 years. That grant from the USDA was the turning point. $12,000 for gear that actually worked. It meant real irrigation lines. It meant tools that didn't snap in my hands and a sturdy used truck to replace the dying beast Howard had loaned me. When the year closed out, I was tired in a way that settled deep in my bones. My palms were rough leather. My spine was stiff. I was usually unconscious by 9 o'clock at night. The to-do list never shrank. There was always a fix needed, always a lesson waiting. But there was dignity in it. I had forged a life here. I didn't start the fire, Estelle did that, but I had kept the flame alive. I made it my own. I made it a sanctuary. Before I continue with what came next, I need to say thanks. Thank you for walking this path with me. Thank you for holding space for that frightened kid who was counting out $127 convinced she had hit a dead end. If you are still reading, consider yourself part of this circle now. I want to hear your story too. Tell me about something you have constructed from the ground up. Is it a safe haven? A family? A career? A fresh start? Leave a note below. And please stay close, because the next chapter holds a memory I will carry with me forever. My 22nd birthday landed on a Saturday, though it nearly slipped my mind. When you grow up in the system, milestones are just days. Best case scenario was a mandatory card from a caseworker. Maybe a generic supermarket cake if the foster parents felt obligated. Hope is dangerous, so I learned to live without it. It was safer to expect nothing. The town of Millbrook, however, refused to let the day pass quietly. Della rolled in early, truck antenna bobbing with balloons refusing to look me in the eye. I am only here to help with the livestock, she lied, keeping her face straight. Pure coincidence. By midday, the driveway was full. Gus arrived hauling a cooler packed with ribeyes for the grill. Opal presented a 3-tiered chocolate masterpiece she baked herself. The frosting reading, "Happy Birthday, Wren," was a bit slanted, but you could taste the care in it. Howard made the long haul down from the state line just to be here. Even Marcus Chen, the attorney who fought for my land, stopped by, no longer just legal counsel but a fixture in this makeshift family. They transformed the yard with folding tables and strung amber lights through the maples just as the leaves were turning gold. An old playlist of classic country tracks drifted from a portable speaker. 30 souls or more stood on my soil to honor a day I had not even planned to mark. "Speech!" A voice rang out once the plates were cleared. "Don't be shy, Wren." I rose to my feet, scanning the crowd. Faces that were strangers a year ago were now my anchor. Folks who offered a hand with no promise of return. People who saw worth in me when I felt worthless. They taught me the definition of kin. I am at a loss. I confessed, voice cracking, forcing me to pause and steady my breathing. 12 months back, I was tallying loose change in a room I was losing. I was convinced my life was empty. Just me against the void. I believed I was destined to be one of the forgotten ones, fading away without leaving a ripple. I choked up again. The gratitude was a lump in my throat. But the isolation was gone. I had a grandmother loving me in secret. Writing weekly letters, fighting to keep this dirt under family ownership. She held the gate open for my return, knowing she likely would not be standing there to greet me. I caught Gus's eye, weather-beaten skin crinkling with a smile. Della, who had become my rock. Opal, who fed me when my pockets were empty. Frank Nayan. Howard, everyone who showed up. And now I have this circle. I told them, I am not sure how I earned this grace, but thank you. You have rewritten the meaning of family for me. The night dissolved into Embrace's happy tears and enough leftovers to feed an army. As twilight settled and the noise softened into quiet chat, Della nudged a package into my grip. Tissue paper wrapped around a frame. "We uncovered this while sorting Estelle's belongings at the parish," she murmured. "It belongs to you." I peeled back the paper. The image inside was new to me. It showed Estelle, decades younger, standing right here on this porch. She was cradling a bundle in a yellow blanket, a tiny, flushed, flawless infant. Me, only a few days old, turned over the backing bore Estelle's steady pre-sickness script, Wren Elizabeth Calloway, 1 week the loveliest sight in creation. She had held me, I never knew that. Deep down, I had convinced myself we were strangers from the start, severed at birth. But she was present. She held me close at 7 days old. She gazed at me and felt love, before the state stepped in. "There is one more thing," Della whispered. This was in the box, too. It was set apart from the weekly letters, tucked deep in a drawer. I think she wanted you to find it last. Once the rest were read. She passed me an envelope, brittle with age, my name scrawled on the front. The ink was shaky, but the spirit was Estelle's. I took a sharp breath. My hands shook as I broke the seal. The note was brief, penned in her final days. "My dearest Wren, if this is in your hands, you have finally made it home. If you are reading this, it means you found the stash and decided to put down roots. God, I'd give anything to see your face right now, to watch you bloom into the woman I always knew was in there." There's one piece of the story I held back in the other notes. I kept it quiet because I didn't know how heavy it might sit on your heart. But you should know I was there the day you came into the world. Your mama rang me the second the contractions started. I drove that old pickup through the pitch black, counting down 12 hours of asphalt, praying to every saint I knew that I wouldn't be too late. And I made it. Before anyone else got the chance, I held you. 7 pounds and 3 ounces, sporting your mother's nose and already showing your grandfather's hard-headed nature. You wrapped those tiny fingers around my pinky, and it hit me all at once. I knew right then that my heart belonged to you until my dying breath. Before that night, the silence between your mother and me had stretched on for years. We fought hard when she left Nebraska. Words were thrown that neither of us could take back. But the second she said she was carrying you, that anger just evaporated. I drove those 12 hours just to see you. I stayed for 2 weeks helping her find her footing, watching her learn how to be a mama. I truly believed we had time to mend the fences. I thought we had all the time in the world. Then the crash stole her away, the system took you, and the clock ran out on us. I am writing this for a morning I might never see with my own eyes. A morning where you stand in my kitchen reading this ink, living in the sanctuary I held on to just for you. When that day comes, I want no secrets left between us. I need you to know how fiercely you were adored from your very first gasp of air. How hard we battled to keep you close. My heart swells knowing you found the path back home. You are not cast adrift, Wren. You never were alone. You spring from a line of people who loved you beyond measure. You are made of this soil, these pastures, this old house that harbored all our silent prayers. You come from grit and iron will, from a bloodline that refuses to fold even when the night is at its darkest. That is your true legacy. It isn't just the deeds, the cash, or the acreage. It is the certainty that you were wanted, that you were cherished, that you have a place on this earth where you fit. Now, there is one last thing. Go to the barn. In the third stall on the left, check the floorboards. One is loose. I have been guarding it for 21 years. Happy birthday, my sweet girl. Forever yours, Grandma Estelle. A hush fell over the celebration. Eyes turned toward me, waiting. I probably looked like all the blood had drained from my face. I need to check the barn, I murmured. Della and Gus trailed behind me as I cut across the yard in the twilight. Shadows had claimed the interior, but I knew every inch of that space by heart now. Third stall, left side. I dropped to my knees, sweeping my palms over the rough timber until my fingers caught the edge. A loose plank, identical to the hiding spot in Estelle's room. I worked it free. Resting in the dust beneath was another metal canister. This one was in better shape, barely scratched, bound in a ribbon that time had bleached from crimson to a soft, dusty rose. I lifted it out and eased the lid off. Nestled inside was a savings bond, 21 years old. Issued in my name the year of my birth, and according to the slip, now valued at just over $12,000. Tucked underneath lay a slip of paper scrawled in Estelle's distinctive script. For your schooling, my dear, or whatever wild dream calls to you. Your grandfather opened this account the very day we learned your mother was expecting. We deposited a little something every single year until the system snatched you up. It has been sitting here waiting for your return. Make it count. Love, Grandma E. $12,000. That was enough to wrap up my degree. Enough to study remotely while I kept the farm running. Enough to construct the life my grandparents began mapping out before I even took my first breath. I sat back in the straw wrapped in the scent of livestock and soil and potential, and I let the tears come. But they weren't heavy this time. No grief, no hollowness. Just a profound, marrow-deep thankfulness for a lineage I never knew one I was finally starting to comprehend. They had cherished me from the start. Before I had a name or a face, I was loved, planned for, and hoped for. And even when the world ripped us apart, that love never wavered. That was 3 years ago. I am 25 now. The homestead is thriving, or at least staying afloat, which any farmer will tell you is pretty much the same victory. The wheat ripples out to the skyline every summer. The vegetable patch has swelled to nearly a full acre, and the coop now houses 50 laying hens. I also brought in a small herd of goats that, against all odds, ended up being the highlight of my day. I knocked out my associate degree online last spring and immediately pivoted to a bachelor's in sustainable agriculture. The $12,000 from the tin box handled the bulk of the cost, and scholarships picked up the slack. Come next year, I'll be the first one in this bloodline to walk away with a 4-year degree. I like to think Estelle is beaming somewhere. We lost Gus last spring. He went quietly in his sleep exactly the way he always insisted he wanted to leave this world. He left me his old tractor and a note telling me how proud he was of the woman standing in his fields. He said I reminded him of Estelle. I keep his note in the metal canister right alongside hers. Just one more testament to the fact that I was truly loved. Della tied the knot last summer with James, that vet she bumped into at the clinic. They've settled into a cozy spot in town with a backyard, but she still makes her way out here almost every weekend. We end up on the porch swing, same as always, watching the shadows lengthen over the crops I put in the ground with my own 2 hands. Howard drops by every now and then to make sure I'm all right. He's slowing down these days, showing his age, but that sparkle in his eyes hasn't faded a bit. He tells me you're cut from the exact same cloth as Estelle. He means I'm hard-hated, determined to hold on to the people and places that count. She's on my mind constantly. When I'm out walking the property at dawn, I can almost feel her pacing right beside me. At dusk, when I settle into this old wooden seat, I sense her in the rhythm of the chains. God knows she must have sat here countless times before I ever showed up. I still pull out her old notes when the days get heavy. It's like hearing her whisper straight to my soul. It hurts knowing she never got to see me walk back through that door. She only held me for those first few days of my existence and never again. Yet she passed down every single thing she owned, the acres, the savings, this roof over my head. But more than that, she left me the certainty that I mattered, that I was wanted, that I had a place in this universe. That's the real treasure she left behind. A few weeks back, I put some new roots down a line of apple trees guarding the west fence. They're tiny things right now, barely reaching my knees. It'll be a long time before we see a single apple. But give it time. They'll stretch up and cast cool shadows over this earth that my grandmother saved just for me. I picture kids scrambling up those branches one day. Maybe my own if the stars align, or maybe a child who just needs a safe place to land. A kid who needs proof that they are cherished. The system hasn't changed much. It's still full of lost souls, just like I used to be. Feeling invisible, rejected, absolutely sure that nobody gives a damn about them. Just kids ticking off dates on a calendar until they age out, sent packing with nothing but a trash bag for a suitcase and a bureaucracy that doesn't remember their names. Della and I have been talking about it. About what it would take to unlock these doors and offer a child the sanctuary Estelle fought so hard to give me but couldn't. I can't do it right this second. I'm not quite there yet. But down the road, this place won't just be something I received. It'll be what I leave behind. A sanctuary where affection is the heirloom we pass on, where no kid ever doubts their worth. That's the heart of her wish for me, I believe. Not just to inhabit a house, but to build a home. To take that spark she saved for me and turn it into a fire. To shatter that pattern of being left behind that scarred my early years. As I'm sharing this with you, I'm resting here while the sunset turns the pastures into a canvas of burnt orange and bronze. The air is gentle tonight. You can smell the harvest on the breeze, and the crickets are just starting up their nightly orchestra. My mind drifts back to that terrified girl counting out $127, convinced she was destitute. She wasn't empty, though. She was just blind to it. It's hard to see the dawn when you're standing in the dead of night. We miss the gifts waiting in the wings. The affection that's been quietly trailing us the whole time. The sanctuary that belongs to us before we even locate it. It exists. I swear to you it's real. Thanks for letting me share my heart. If you're still here with me, you're not a stranger anymore. You're part of this circle. You're part of the lineage Estelle began, and I'm carrying forward. I'd love to know your story. What's the most precious gift you've ever received that didn't cost a dime? Was it a second shot? Someone's faith in you? Surprise kindness? Drop it down in the comments. Your words might be the exact lifeline another person needs right now. And if this resonated with you, go ahead and join our channel family. We talk about starting over, about putting down roots, and about that stubborn love that tracks us down even when we feel isolated. Here's the truth I've gathered over 25 years. Solitude is a lie. There is love out there with your name on it. Someone is keeping a light on, just waiting for you to walk through the door. And when you connect with that place where you fit, it shifts your entire universe. So don't quit. Hold on to that hope. Trust that your final chapter hasn't been written yet. Your legacy is out there. Thanks for spending this time with me. Catch you in the next story. We all go through seasons where we feel completely cut off from the world. No kin, no backup, nobody in our corner. We check our pockets and assume that's the sum of our value. But reality is often hidden. It's not what's in front of your face, but what's been quietly surviving in the background without you noticing. This journey isn't really about dirt or property deeds. It's about understanding what it means to belong. Real love isn't always noisy or flashy. Sometimes it's invisible, but it never leaves. There are folks who have loved us from the shadows, fought battles we never saw, and gave up everything just to keep a path open for us. Institutions crumble. The world is cruel. Years get robbed by callous choices. But genuine love that endures. It bides its time. It waits until we're mature enough to grasp it, tough enough to carry it, and brave enough to claim what was ours all along. The structure in this tale wasn't raised from timber or clay, but forged from memory's grit and a faith that refused to break. That patch of earth wasn't a lucky break. It was the harvest of a promise kept for a lifetime. And the youth wasn't merely saved, they stood up on their own 2 feet, finally understanding their right to belong, to be shielded, and to be cherished. The profound truth here is that you don't need to know a person's name to be sustained by their love. You don't need to see hope to know it's there. And you certainly don't need to be invincible when you start. Just don't let go. If you feel destitute today, remind yourself that your true inheritance might still be down the road. That legacy might be a stranger, a recollection, a chance, or simply the quiet conviction that you deserve a life of peace. Keep walking. Keep trusting. Because it is more than likely that somewhere past your current vision, a place called home is waiting for you to find your way back.